Bill Clinton and Betsy Wright. They suggested that I go to work for a place called the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. And they said my talents could really be used there. It was the best kept secret in Arkansas. The fact that I was brought in by Bill Clinton meant that there was something about me that everybody had to be careful with. After about 2 weeks, I went to Wooten Epps, and I said, Wooten, I think I've got enough background on this that we can start marketing it. Now, what is the criteria for loans? He said, whoever Bill wants to get a loan. To go back, though, to that moment in time, I'd been there about a month, and I realized that I was in the epicenter of what I'd always heard about all my life. What most people have heard about is the machine. I was literally working, sitting in the middle of Bill Clinton's political machine. It was where he made payoffs, where he repaid favors to people for campaign support. I was in an interesting seat, and I knew it. In that particular board meeting, I was sitting at the end of the table. James Brannion, who was chairman of the board at that time, was sitting at the head of the table. James Brannion stood up in a public restaurant, and he hollered at the Beverly Enterprises guy, Bobby Stevens, and said, did you get the $50,000 campaign contribution from the client that you're introducing the loan for? He said, not yet. He said, well, then hold up the loan till we get it. I stood up, went up to James, and I said, James, don't yell stuff like that. You don't need to be yelling it in a restaurant. That sounds real bad. He was just burly and arrogant. He said, who cares?
Bill Clinton sold the concept of ADFA to the people of Arkansas as a vehicle for creating jobs and assisting churches and schools. In reality, millions of taxpayer-guaranteed dollars were being channeled to Clinton's election campaigns, to his inner circle of friends, and to his wife Hillary's law firm. This may explain why ADFA had been drafted in such a manner as to keep its decision-making procedures secret.
If you needed $1 million, you had to get your application handled by the Rose Law Firm, pay them $50,000. There were 5 other companies in the state of Arkansas that were actually more qualified in bond structuring and applications, but Rose Law Firm got them all. I started checking around, and I kept asking, well, one thing's bothering me to the comptroller, Bill Wilson, how do people make payments on these loans? He looked at me and said, they don't. He thought I knew. Well, that blew my mind. And this is about 2 months in, and it was getting tough then. So I started gathering the documents. After everybody left, I would stick around as if I were working on the annual report. That would give me access to all the documents. And I made copies of them all. For about 2 months, I watched accounts accumulate money. At the end of the month, they zero balanced. I didn't understand totally what that meant, but I thought I'd go ahead and steal the records anyway. I did. It was soon after that I met a man named Bill Duncan. Bill Duncan took the zero balance, and he told me what that meant. He said, you know what that means? I said, He said, they're laundering drug money. There were $100 million a month in cocaine coming in and out of Mean, Arkansas. They had a problem. They were doing so much money in cocaine, $100 million. You create a problem in a little state like Arkansas. How do you clean $100 million a month? ADFA until 1989 never banked in Arkansas. What they would do is they would ship the money down to Florida, a bank in Florida, which later would be connected to BCCI. They would ship money to a bank in Atlanta, Georgia, which, by the way, was later connected to BCCI. They'd ship to Citicorp in New York, which would send the money overseas. And there was an interesting one, a bank in Chicago. That bank, by the way, is partially owned by Dan Rostenkowski. Dan Lassiter would get the bonds. He would become the broker for the bonds. He would transfer money back to ADFA. He never sold a bond. The money then would leave ADFA, go into one of the various banks for the specific bond loan, and they would zero it out. When they zeroed it out, they were giving it back to Lassiter. unless they're handling fees. Your president, the President of the United States, not only was a part of a system that was laundering millions of cocaine dollars, your president signed off on it. He can't deny that he did. You see, because of that, there's one little catch. Every loan ADFA made, Bill Clinton himself had to sign off on it. More than Bill Clinton, you better identify the people in the loop of the drug running. You better identify the people in the loop for money laundering. And what you'll find there is those people go straight to Washington. Act 1062, if you look at it, it says that ADFA was developed and created to provide low-interest bond loans for churches, schools, colleges. So now look what happened to our legislature. They voted on a bill creating ADFA, thinking that they were getting money to colleges and schools to buy books and so forth. What better way to run thousands of, tens of millions of dollars, launder it, clean it up, and use the cover of a state agency to do it. The first loan made at ADFA was made to Parkometer, a company called Parkometer. Seth Ward was the owner. As I started looking, I found out that the Secretary Treasurer was Webb Hubbell. Then I found out Webb Hubbell was Seth Ward's son-in-law. Guess who drafted the legislation creating Act 1062, which created the Arkansas Development Finance Authority? Webb Hubbell. Guess who introduced the legislation to our legislators and got it passed through our House? Webb Hubbell. Guess who got the first loan? Webb Hubbell. Imagine this. Guess who did the audit and the evaluation of the application? Rose Law Firm. You guessed it. Who signed it? Webb Hubbell, Hillary Clinton. You see, that's against the law in Arkansas. You can't investigate yourself when the good faith and credit of the state of Arkansas is involved in a bond issue. He broke the law. Good Lord willing, creek don't rise. Mr. Hubbell will be serving some time in the pen for that one.
Ironically, Webb Hubbell, a senior partner at the Rose Law Firm, was chairman of the Conflicts of Interest Committee at Rose. In 1988, he successfully advanced the Ethics in Government Act, which required Arkansas legislators to report governmental conflicts of interest. Incredibly, this law specifically exempted Governor Bill Clinton, his appointees, and his relatives. Clinton's appointment of Hubbell to the U.S. Justice Department exemplified the administration's total disregard for legal ethics. Hubbell's hasty resignation in March 1994 for supposed overbilling of Rose clients was merely a ploy to remove Hubbell from the limelight before extensive criminal charges could be brought against him.
Let me tell you about Parkometer. The first loan was $2.85 million. Never was a penny of that paid back. It was all a scam. They had, let's say, 100 employees when they started. They got $2.85 million. You know how many employees they had after they got that influx of cash? 100. Didn't increase anything. It's not a new building on the property. They didn't even remodel a bathroom. As the newspaper people started inquiring about the Parkometer loans, what they found was that instead of making parking meters, Parkometer was actually building retrofit nose cone compartments that were being shipped to MENA. We find out that the nose cones were actually being used to smuggle dope back into the country. And what is scary, what's so scary, it's the same cast of characters. Webb Hubbell, the Rose Law Firm, are guilty, I say to you, of conspiring to defraud the state of Arkansas, the federal government, and conspired to solicit the sales and the laundering of money for illegal drugs. This is your president. This is his circle of power. These are the people, when he got elected president, he did not pass go. He took them straight to Washington with him. And by all things holy, I think he was planning to set up and do the same thing in Washington.
And this is a very mysterious symbol which you know, you've heard all sorts of explanations for it, but I'm going to give you the Masonic Illuminati inner meaning of what this means tonight. And it's going to probably gross you out and astonish you, and I apologize in advance for that. But this is what it means. Crowley reveals the secret behind the all-seeing eye symbol in one of his books, the Book of Thoth, which is a very advanced manual on tarot card readings. And this is the eye of Lucifer. But believe it or not, it corresponds to a human organ that, for lack of a more delicate term, we'll call the rectum. Which is kind of ironic when you think about it, that this represents Lucifer. And what this refers to is that the occult archaeometric doctrine of Masonry is that by accessing alternate universes through sodomy, especially of young boys, you can access alternate dimensions of reality through what are called the tunnels of Typhon. There is a belief that through this sexual perversion, they can access these tunnels into alternate universes, alternate realities. And the goal of this kind of magic is to find your own universe and become the god over that universe. This buys into the modern day physics theory that there's many, many dimensions of reality. Maybe you've read about that. Alternate universes. It shows up in science fiction a lot. And then once you're the god of this universe, you can start sucking the energy out of it. And you can use that energy through this child to live forever and ever and ever. And there are men, I have met several that claim to be hundreds of years old. Now, of course, are they lying their lips off? I frankly think they are. This is a deception. I mean, this is such a problem that we are actually, I now know of 5 national support groups that are helping people that are survivors of Masonic ritual abuse. This is that serious a problem. And let me tell you something else. The other 95, 96, 97 Masons have an even bigger problem. Because the spiritual headship over their organization trickles back down to this monster. And because of that, even if they're good men, even if they don't know about this, you know what happens? They begin to struggle with profound temptations to move in this area of pedophilia and homosexuality. And this is dangerous stuff. I mean, this is spreading throughout the world like a plague. We have organizations like NAMBLA, the National Association of Man-Boy Love, which their slogan is sex before 8 or it's too late. And they're trying to lower the age of consent to 8 years old. And all of this can be laid at the door of this occult monstrosity. If you're a Mason and you're in an organization with this kind of spiritual headship, this is all around you and you don't even know it. It's like a fish swimming in polluted water that's full of spiritual sewage. And you can't help but take this into yourself. But it's important to understand that in all of this, that I myself, as a normal, red-blooded heterosexual, was finding myself continually drawn into sexual thoughts and sexual fantasies about little boys. I thank God I never acted on any of that. But it was being forced on me because I was under the umbrella of the Masonic leadership.
The more humanity strays from its origin, the more we deny our bond with nature, the farther from perfection we become. We are the only creatures on the planet that use symbols in reference to something else. We use symbols for absolutely everything the mind can conceive of. There is at least one word or icon or gesture to insinuate everything our 5 senses can detect and then some. But along with this beautiful gift comes a flaw. Most people are unwilling to seek and create their own interpretations of these symbols. Instead, they blindly submit to preconceived definitions and connotations given by sources unknown. Because of this, many things have been predetermined in our understanding of life without our knowledge. Words can be perverted and used to manipulate rather than to inform. Symbols can be used to segregate rather than unite. And those given the responsibility and authority to disseminate information to the public possess the ability to do with it what they choose. Listen carefully. Every 26,000 years, our solar system passes through the 12 zodiac signs. Ancient civilizations such as the Hopi, Egyptians, Cherokee, Apache, and the Mayans were aware of this great cycle and developed calendars according to it. This cycle stems from many different occurrences in nature, such as the sun's orbit around Alcyone, the central star of Pleiades, as well as the 260-day cycle of human gestation. This cycle is broken down into 5 sub-cycles of 5,125 years each, which were thought to have their own age. The Aztec calendar or Mesoamerican sunstone depicted each cycle being destroyed by one of the 5 elements. The cycle we are currently in is the age of the 5th sun, 3113 BC to 2012 AD. More precisely, this great cycle ends December 21st, 2012. Mayan cultures and civilizations were aware of this end date, and Nostradamus even prophesied about it. For Earth, which we are currently in now, is also known as the movement, shift, evolution, and consciousness. Living Maya timekeepers proclaim that the Earth has been through fire, earth, air, and water. The final element is ether, or center. The Hopi believe that the 4th world of destruction closes and the 5th world of peace begins on December 21st, 2012. The great cycle is broken down into what the Mayans believe to be 13 Bactans. Earth began its 13th Bactan in 1618, which was known as the triumph of materialism, as well as the time of great forgetting, in the prediction that humanity will lose the awareness of their true bond with nature by means of external possessions. This is where ego and domination became the predominant ambition of the civilized world. Not surprisingly, this time frame was precisely when the worldwide coordination of Pope Gregory XIII forced the 12-month calendar as well as the first mechanical clock onto indigenous peoples. This is what's known as the error in time. Before the inception of the 2 instruments by the Roman Catholic Church, each year was divided into 13 moon cycles with 28 days each. But the most detrimental part of these 2 instruments is the insinuation that time was something external, something inorganic and outside the body that we must watch and obey. The 7th century Mayan prophet Pacalvatan left a powerful message for future generations of evolution. If humanity wishes to save itself from biospheric destruction, it must return to living in natural time. He also foretold of our accelerated technological society and of the damage of our collective divergence from natural law in exchange for material values. Astrology and the studies of the heavens are as old as civilization. Throughout the past several thousand years, new religions have all but replaced the pagan religions of prior years. Man has been so thoroughly fascinated with these objects in the sky that they formed constellations from them and applied stories to them. In Greek mythology, these were personified as the gods. We notice in the structures that still stand to this day that the most ancient of civilizations put forth more wealth, power, time, and effort into the locations of the stars than any other practice. This is commonly written off as simple curiosity. But the truth is becoming clear by the day as we close in on the 0 year of December 21st, 2012. It is a common misconception that the pagan religion is rarely practiced today. In fact, paganism in its evolution is the most widely practiced form of religion. You may ask yourself how this is possible. The answer is hidden in nearly all of our current popular religions. But who would have the power and the desire to integrate a seemingly long-gone religion into such popular opposite denominations? Dr. Adam Weishaupt was born on February 6, 1748 in Ingolstadt, in a city in Bayern, or Bavaria, Germany. This interesting character was the son of a rabbi and converted to Catholicism after his father's death. After studying French philosophers such as Voltaire, he supposedly learned the teachings of Satanism in the French royal court. World-famous central banker Mayer Amschel Rothschild of the Rothschild dynasty chose Weishaupt to create the Coven of Golden Dawn, which to this day is Rothschild's private coven. Amschel Rothschild, for those who are unaware, instigated the American Revolution, America's supposed liberation from Britain. Rothschild instructed Weishaupt to create the ancient illuminated seers of Bavaria. This is better known as the Order of the Illuminati. The name in Luciferian teachings means the bearer of the light, the illuminated, or the enlightened one. The Areopagite, or tribunal, was the inner circle of the Supreme Order, and were the only ones privy to secret meetings. In Nesta Webster's book, The World Revolution, she states, "The art of illuminism lay in enlisting dupes as well as adepts, and by encouraging dreams of honest visionaries or the schemes of fanatics, by flattering the vanity of ambitious egotists, by working on unbalanced brains, or by playing such passions as greed and power to make men of totally divergent aims serve the secret purpose of the sect. People with money were welcomed but kept oblivious to actual secrets. The purpose is to win power and riches, to undermine secular or religious government, and obtain the masters of the world." The goal of the order was and still is to one day deliver the human race from all religion. Progression through the political and religious hierarchy was obtained by blackmail in the form of bribing people in power with sex from local prostitutes. In the 16th and 17th century, high-ranking officials in political or religious organizations were liable to be sentenced to death for such acts. In 1780, Baron Franz Friedrich Knigge was recruited. He was the most instrumental person in the marriage of the Masons and the Illuminati. This allowed the Illuminati to expand rapidly with the use of Masonic lodges. On August 29, 1781, Congress of Wilhelmsbad declared the alliance official. Those in attendance were put under oath, never to reveal what took place in that meeting. Comte de Virieu, a Mason from Martinez Day Lodge at Lyons, was questioned about the meeting upon his arrival home. He stated, "I can only tell you that all this is much more serious than you think. The conspiracy which is being woven is so well thought out that it will be, so to speak, impossible for the monarchy and the church to escape it." He later denounced the Illuminati. Sir John Dee. John Dee was a servant to Queen Elizabeth Tudor of the Tudor dynasty. John Dee was the head of the British Secret Service, the MI5. He was also known for the practice of black magic and his affiliation with the occult. If this is your first time hearing about the occult, or are unaware of its dominance in the world to this day, pay close attention. Pagan symbols, gods, rituals, and doctrines are the basis for most every religion practiced throughout the world. The Christian or Catholic symbols of the cross derive from the solstice and the equinox division lines on a zodiac calendar. The word heaven is in reference to what pagan religions referred to as the heavens, or galactic bodies. And the crossing of the age of Pisces into Aquarius is actually in reference to constellations, which interestingly enough occur at the exact same time as the great cycle prophesied by the Maya, as well as many other cultures. As said before, pantheistic rituals are prevalent in all monotheistic religions today. Circumcision is a pagan ritual, marking males in a ceremonial fashion. Weddings are pagan by nature in the wearing of a ring, which symbolizes the ring of Saturn. Funerals follow the same pagan-derived ritual when a sacred geometrical tomb is placed over a grave to embody and immortalize the spirit. Baptism is a ritual to submerge a child in holy water to symbolize the renewal of life, just as rain replenishes the earth. The Holy Grail filled with wine is a representation of the blood that comes from the birth canal during menstruation, not the blood of Christ. This ritual was taken over by the patriarchal society. Males could not give life as women do, so to symbolize a male giving life was to draw blood, which could only be done by injury. In ancient Egypt, the goddess Isis was the personification of wisdom. Pharaoh Akhenaten changed the warship to himself as he proclaimed himself Amun-Re, the sun god. The word Amen at the end of a prayer spawned from the praise given to Amen-Re. From there, the Hebrews left Egypt and traveled north into the Middle East, where they encountered the Canaanites, who worshipped the god of Saturn, El. The merging of these three gods became the name of the land today, which is known as Isis, Re, El, or Israel. 98% of Judaism is based around the worship of Saturn. And the sacred day of worship is Saturday. The worship practice on Sunday is originated from the Egyptians who worshiped the sun god. Most people simply pass these things off and never question their origins, but this just scratches the surface of the pagan influence over the present day. It is not just found in religions, it is found right here in our own backyard. On January 22, 1783, Congress ratified a contract stating that all bills of credit emitted, monies borrowed, and debts contracted by or under the authority of Congress before the assembling of the United States in pursuance of the present Confederation shall be deemed and considered a charge against the United States for payment and satisfaction whereof the United States and the public faith are hereby solemnly pledged. The party that the U.S. owed these loans to? King George. I hope this paints a picture for you of how Great Britain funded both sides of the Revolution. To this day, Great Britain collects taxes from the United States via the IRS. The IRS isn't even an agency of the United States government. If you don't believe me, look up IRS publication 6209. The FCC, CIA, FBI, and NASA were never part of the United States government. The U.S. government only holds shares of the stock in various agencies. Social Security numbers are also issued by the UN through the IMF. The Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865, was also instigated by Amschel Rothschild to divide the United States and force it into debt with a central bank. The goal was to put the country of the U.S. back into the hands of Britain through huge loans taken out for munitions. To do this, it was crucial to put a controversial issue in limbo such as slavery. Knowing full well that the Declaration of Independence would create an uproar among southern states that depended heavily upon slave labor, it was signed in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania by 35 people, 33 of whom were Freemasons. John Brown was a Mason and a Rosicrucian who was brought to power by William Lloyd Garrison and Senator Charles Sumner, both descendants of the Illuminati bloodline. With the help of the New York Times, John Brown was built up to be a hero in the anti-slavery movement. Ulysses S. Grant, former president, was born Hiram S. Grant. This name was given to him by his father, Master Mason Jesse Root Grant. Jesse Root Grant worked for John Brown's father and then went on to work for E.A. Collins, one of the 13 Illuminati bloodlines. Ulysses S. Grant was brought to power rapidly with help from Collins. From April 1861 to May 1864, Grant went from the rank of private to commander-in-chief of the entire Union Army. Once Grant was appointed president, his cabinet consisted of 8 Freemasons, including Alphonso Taft, which was William Taft's father, who was also an ancestor of Bill Clinton. Jonas Mills Bundy was one of the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, who was also the presidential advisor to Grant as well as the next 2 presidents. And cabinet member Columbus Delano was Franklin Delano Roosevelt's grandfather. In November 21, 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt wrote, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson." Abraham Lincoln's father was A.A. Springs, who was part of the Rothschild dynasty. Lincoln's half-brother worked for Louis Cass Exert in the Merovingian dynasty, which was the 13th Illuminati bloodline. Exert also owned Jekyll Island, which was where the Federal Reserve Bank was created. In the mid-1800s, Abraham Lincoln and the Whigs were trying desperately to keep Andrew Jackson from establishing a gold standard called the independent treasury system. Lincoln and his party fought to set up a central bank, making such public speeches as, "Under a gold and silver standard, all will suffer more or less, and very many will lose everything that renders life desirable. This statement resounds elements of scare tactics in this speech and other speeches on the matter given by Abraham Lincoln. They give no real evidence or explanation. In the early 1900s, after a failed attempt for Woodrow Wilson to set up what was called the League of Nations following World War I, Wilson and his advisor, Colonel House, set up the Institute of International Affairs. This institute had two branches. One set up in England called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the Council on Foreign Relations was incorporated as the American branch in New York on July 29, 1921. Founding members include Colonel House, J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, and a few others. A national income tax was declared unconstitutional in 1895 by the Supreme Court, but a constitutional amendment was proposed in Congress by Senator Nelson Aldrich. This makes much more sense when you notice that Nelson Aldrich was also known as being the authentic voice of J.P. Morgan and later married into the Rockefeller family. Today, 27 to 35% of American workers' pay is taxed, and this money goes to a central bank called the Federal Reserve, or the Fed. For those of you who are unaware of the Federal Reserve Bank and what it is capable of, it is a non-government-owned bank that provides the U.S. with all of its currency. They control the inflation rate by the amount of money in circulation. Yet the most amazing aspect of the central bank is the suspension of specie payments, in which the Fed can refuse to pay their obligations, yet taxpayers must pay their debts or go bankrupt. In other words, the suspension of specie payments is the central bank's right to breach a contract with no penalty whatsoever. In even simpler terms, it's called theft. How is it that the Fed is allowed to breach any contract they wish without penalty from the government? The answer is simple. The Federal Reserve Bank has power over the government instead of under it. Carroll Quigley, Bill Clinton's mentor while at Georgetown University, wrote of central banks, "They want nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole, controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world acting in concert, by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences." It is important to note that nearly all of the founders of the Federal Reserve Bank were involved in the conception of the Council on Foreign Relations. Since 1934, when the Fed was established, almost every United States Secretary of State, all Secretaries of War or Defense since Henry L. Stimson, almost every head of CIA since Allen Dulles, nearly all presidential candidates, Dwight D. Eisenhower, JFK, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton were members of the CFR. George Bush Sr. was actually the CFR director from 1977 to 1979. Understand that all of these high-ranking government positions were lobbied into place by the organizations set up by the international banking cartel. There are secret meetings held everywhere by many of the same members in the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, the United Nations, and the two branches of the Institute of International Affairs. These groups make up what is known as the Round Table, developed by Cecil Rhodes. Other offshoots or preliminary groups are the Bohemian Group and Yale University's Skull and Bones organization, which we all know George W. Bush, George Bush Sr., and John Kerry were all a part of. Most every meeting by these groups are attended by the most powerful government officials, corporate leaders, media moguls, and royal families in the world. These meetings are held in secret and not a word of them reaches the mainstream media. How is it that so many powerful people can attend meetings alongside the mainstream media and not a mention of it makes it to the public? This all may start making more sense when you start understanding that common citizens aren't meant to know what is happening at the top. Is there any dispute that to gain power in our day and age, it takes strategy and intelligence rather than brute force? Logic will tell you that in any sport or game, to claim victory, you must keep your moves strategic and secret. Why would it be any different in global politics?
If I bring up chess master up here and ask him, what are the principles, Wojciech, and become a master of the game of chess, he'll say these four things. He'll say that you need a sense of patience. Now, if you don't have patience, don't even try to begin the game to learn it. He'll say you need a sense of timing. If you don't have a sense of timing, don't open the book. You have to have knowledge of your opponent, right? And then the fourth one that they'll tell you is that you need to have the willingness to make any and all sacrifices. Now, ladies and gentlemen, why are the dark side winning the game? It's because they've got infinite patience. They've been working on one thing for 50,000 years. I call that patience. They got a brilliant sense of timing, because they know all about the astrology and the divination that we forgot, that our agricultural ancestors all knew about. Well, we're with the Julian calendar and we're not interested in any of that stuff anymore. We're slaves of the watch, but we don't know about the higher time to rule our own lives by. They have amazing knowledge of you, right? They have intense knowledge of us, their enemies. And the fourth one is the clincher, isn't it? Because they're willing to make any and all sacrifices when and wherever they need to do it.
But Adolf, that would break our treaty. You're a good guy. Why, you hate war. You wouldn't go back on your word.
Are you kidding?
George W. Bush is a direct descendant of Godfrey de Bouillon. The Bouillons were servants of Pope Gregory VII and led the European noblemen into the crusade in order to recapture Jerusalem from the Islamic faith. He became the first king of Jerusalem and Duke of Lower Lorraine, which was known as a major region for the bloodline linked to the Illuminati. Bush is closely related to every European monarch. He is the 13th cousin of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles. He also has kinship with every member of the British royal family, the House of Windsor. The House of Windsor is known for abandoning their German names after World War I due to criticism of the people. A lesser-known fact about the House of Windsor, however, is the heavy funding contribution to bring Adolf Hitler to power in the rise of World War II. The swastika is actually a symbol of the sun, referencing to the Sun Order of the occult. The word Nazi is actually Nazi, one of the Anunnaki children of Mother Goddess Ninharsog in the Sumerian texts. And even the word Holocaust is actually Yiddish for burned sacrifice offering. Heinrich Himmler was the commander of the SS and one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Himmler was a seventh-ray occultist and was very influenced by the book Astara by George Luns, who was an Austrian mystic. This occult book mapped out the plan for a cleansing of ethnicities and bringing about one race, and to revive the ancient tradition of the Knights Templar of the Middle Ages. The Knights Templar were a group largely killed off by the French monarchy. The remaining Templar created many Masonic orders and secret societies throughout Europe, from which the Illuminati is believed to have originated. It's important to note as well that the Bush family's ancestor, Godfrey de Bouillon, was a Holy Templar himself. To this day, every single United States president, with no exception, has a direct bloodline relation to British monarchs. And on December 20th, 1993, George Herbert Walker Bush was knighted by the Queen of England as a Knight Grand Cross of the Most Honorable Order of the Bath for his leadership in the Gulf War. Does it strike you as odd that our president, our leader, kneeled before the Queen of England in a ceremony that symbolizes allegiance? So what does this all mean? It simply means that throughout every major civilization, political power has remained in a select few bloodlines, and it is desperately held in the same manner today. It is openly admitted to the public that major leaders worldwide are part of secret fraternal orders or secret meetings. But what is not disclosed to the public is the purpose of these meetings. So let me spell this out for you. The major leaders from around the world are part of a united effort to remain in power forever. To do so, the people are lured into the trap of perpetual debt, making it impossible to be repaid by the people. So in turn, all property and assets will be repossessed by the debtor. For those of you who are unaware what it means when a government owns everything of yours, It's called socialism. All of this is part of an ultimate goal of the mystery religions. The mystery religion is the paganism we've been talking about all along. But the pagan religions known to the public today are nowhere near as involved as the mystery religion. It is much less confusing than you think. Try to imagine this practice as less of a religion and more of an ambition. The ambition is to reach enlightenment. There is no superhuman intelligence or fantasy involved in this. The gifts of God are very simple. Omnipresence. The power of one being or consciousness to be everywhere at once. Omniscience. The power of knowing everything that can be known. And omnipotence. To have unlimited power. We see all of this today. It cannot be denied. If you still don't believe that the mystery religion is present today, just look around you. There are literally thousands of statues and emblems of ancient religions on every political establishment. Even on military uniforms, these symbols are found everywhere, but not only in our country. The same emblems are found on every nation's military uniform. And why would this be? Because a life taken at a chosen time, place, and a specific manner, it becomes a sacrifice. And to further illustrate this point, on March 20th, 2003, President Bush launched a bombing of Baghdad at 5:50 Baghdad time. This lasted into March 21st. It was called shock and awe by the mainstream media, but according to the mystery religion, this date is known as the Eve of Ostara, more commonly known as the spring or vernal equinox. Occultists worship the goddess of the earth, Gaia, on this day. The Druids knew this date as the spring fertility rite, the day of feast. The war was promptly ended on May 1st, 2003. This date is known in the Druidic calendar as Beltane, or Walpurgis Night. It was named after Saint Walpurga, who was the pagan goddess of fertility. From March 20th to May 1st, the pagan ritual is to give blood to the earth and renew life to the goddess of fertility. What better time frame to declare a bloody war on the days of a ritual sacrifice and end it exactly when the pagan ritual ends? The parallels are uncanny. These are all facts written in many different sources around the world and are available to anyone to discover. Connecting the dots is up to you, but make your own decisions instead of settling for conclusions that others have put in place before you.
Even if you're not a believer in Christ or Christianity, it's undeniable that there's an evil, very dark force that seems to be orchestrating the events worldwide and has been for a very long time.